question, talk about making connections with other environmental groups. I'm part of the Barry contingency today, and there's, as you know, the Barry Action on Nature. There's a local Friends of the Earth group. There's a representative there from Surfers Against Sewage. What's your thoughts on stretching out and making links with other environmental groups?
It's very much my background. It's how I ended up here. With a group in Penarth called Gwylio Penarth Greening, which was basically a transition town organisation. And doing lots of sustainable stuff, and I was the community lead for Plastic Free Penarth. All these sorts of things are really valuable and they're important to communities. But we have to remember that we're a political party, not a pressure group. Our job is to get elected to make the changes that those groups are campaigning for. And I often make the case, you've got Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, fully on board with our policies, we're fully on board with them. Many of us have members of several of these groups, but we also need to remember, and it's important to be visible as the Greens in those groups, but not to try and overtly politicise local action. Be seen to be part of the be seen to be litter picks, be seen to be part of something that someone's organised. But we should be, and this is one of the bugbears for me, we should be, the Labour Party came about to represent the trade unions. We should be the party that represents those organisations, because they have massive memberships. I mean, the National Trust, is it 500,000 at the moment? Or more than all political parties put together. So it's always good at election time, because we get approached by those parties that run up to a Senedd election or a general election. All those different pressure groups and organisations want to speak to all the parties about what's going to be in our manifesto, what they want to see in our manifesto. And it's always very easy being the Green Party candidate, because what they're asking for is already in our manifesto. So we just keep needing to get that message home. But again, it goes back to, we are a political party. We have to get people elected to make that change. Deborah?
What's the Green Party official position on MIMs, and what are we going to do about it if we have one that's different from what government?
Okay, for those that don't know, MIM, which was part of the problem with the planned Belinda Hospital, mutual investment model. It's the Welsh Government's trying to have its cake and eat it. It's PFI by another name. So it's building infrastructure projects on the Never Never, and the taxpayer paying back many, many times more than it would have cost if the government had just put the money up front. So it helps them balance the books. And to Labour's shame, it was Gordon Brown that introduced all this. So you can get something built now and it's not on the books, but the taxpayer ends up paying a lot more for it. Wales Green Party, we haven't, as far as I know, Jennifer might correct me, I don't know if this came up in the policy document.
Yeah, but we didn't actually take a particular position on it, because it's a sort of another, as you say, it's another variant really. I mean, basically it's selling the future, and we're against it.
I think it's safe to say that, because we've got GPW policy and we've got Wales Green Party policy, if something isn't in Wales Green Party policy, it's covered by GPW policy, and that is firmly against PFI. So it's a good point. It's an issue that we should be making more of and raising. Because so many people don't understand how that works.
Just as a point of information, it's not just the hospital, the schools.
Oh, yeah.
The schools initiative is also an so it's quite a large, it's not just to Cardiff, it's...
Yeah, it's Wales-wide. And it's really excruciating watch Mark Drakeford trying to explain how it's not PFI.
Yeah.
I moved to Wales 12 or so years ago, and soon after arriving, trying to decide who to vote for in the next election that came along, George Monbiot had an article in the Guardian saying basically if you're living in Wales, they've already got a Green Party in power, it's called Plaid Cymru. I live in Carmarthenshire, I've been voting for Adam Price and Jonathan Edwards fairly consistently since we moved here. How do we differentiate ourselves?
It's a tricky question in Wales, because there is a lot of, I'm going to use that phrase, there's a lot of common ground. But there are issues, and it varies where you are in Wales as well. In the metropolitan south, it's a lot harder to differentiate sometimes. But going back to the first question about nuclear, Clyde tied themselves in knots about nuclear power, that will forbid. So they fudged their policy to be, they're against new nuclear builds, so restarting Milford B they don't see as new. They have some problems, they have some issues, policies on agriculture that we would disagree with. So what we have to do, as the Green Party, is be there. It goes again back to that presentation. Have as many paper candidates, stand people whenever we can, so people get to see the alternative. Because when there's an election, every single voter in every part of Wales will see a Plaid Cymru candidate on the ballot paper. They won't see a Green Party candidate, and that's what we've got to change starting next year. Jennifer and Paul?
Okay, just a kind of follow-on from that, really. Can you tell us what, because we're now standing for independence, how do you see being Welsh? What does that mean?
I think if you live in Wales and you want to call yourself Welsh, you're Welsh. I've been here 14 years now. It's not the longest I've stayed in one place, that would be Hackney. But I think it's tricky and it's best to avoid getting into that sort of ethnicity question as if Wales is this fixed identity, because that goes down to some very dangerous places. I think, Paul?
Yeah, it's I think where it comes to differentiating ourselves, as I'm sure you remember from the past, if you put internationalism over here and you put nationalism over here, there's a sort of lack of common ground sometimes, I think, between ourselves and Black Cymru. I don't think that independence and nationalism necessarily equate to the same thing. I think independence is a sort of federal sort of model. We're already having a national anthem and language and singing. I'm not Welsh, I lived here since the late 80s, but I'm half English, half West African. But yeah, I think for me, I suppose the question would be that how do we differentiate ourselves without thinking about nationalism? And are we missing an opportunity there? Because I don't think the Welsh are particularly nationalistic in the main. I think that's quite an internationalistic country. Even the rugby internationals are internationals. So it's you know, and I think, you know, they're quite good human in the main as a consequence. I think the nationalism is what Einstein described it as the measles of humanity and infantile disorder. I would wish that we were saying the same thing myself.
We're not saying anything nationalistic. I touched on that in my speech. Our vision of an independent Wales. As the Green Party, we believe in power being devolved to the lowest possible level. So that means a lot of decisions should rest in Cardiff, not in Westminster. But there's a difference between wanting devolved powers, wanting control over one's own systems, and the old-fashioned nationalism. And yes, there are some people like that in Clyde. There are some people who aren't. I haven't met anyone as internationalist as Leanne Wood. Leanne Wood is on the same page as us with so many things. So I think we need to be careful of conflating that. And you're right, nationalism isn't a big driving force in Wales, but we're not pushing a nationalist agenda. And just to refer to what's happening in Cardiff, the alliance between the two parties is because we have so much in common. We don't agree on everything. We'd be one party if we did. But we have so much in common, and the challenges that are facing Cardiff, the challenges that are facing Wales, the challenges facing the world, need us to do whatever we can to make those changes. And that will involve cooperation and conversation. Ian mentioned the by-election in Kent yesterday, when we overtook the Tories. That's because the Lib Dems helped us, because we're talking to the Lib Dems there. So we've got to be very, very careful about saying, we're over here, we believe this, we don't want to talk to anyone else. Rob?
I've got to pick up on that then. That inevitably, you've got one strong party as implied, it inevitably draws our strength away, and until we can separate and not confuse voters, because the key thing about, as you say, cooperating, is that that's done, and it should be a golden rule after the elections, not before the elections, because to me you're taking away people's right to decide whether they want to support Clyde or the Green Party, and that's the important thing. We're losing members because many people come here, they think there's not enough people here, but they go to a Plaid conference, there's 10 times the amount of people, and that's why I think we need to really be strong and confident, proud and loud about our environmental credentials, and that's what our DNA is. It's not what Plaid's DNA is.
I would argue, it's not solely our DNA. Climate justice, social justice and racial justice are all one and the same thing. We're not Greenpeace, we're not an environmental pressure group. On numbers here, I was wondering about the numbers this morning, I did the sums. We've got the same percentage of Welsh members here today as there were GPW members in Birmingham a few weeks ago. So it's not actually that bad. In terms of coming together before an election. If we had a proportional voting system, you're right, we'd make those have those discussions afterwards, because we wouldn't need to be combining resources to get across the line. In terms of Cardiff alone, and I'm not going to know about Cardiff too much because there are people from around Wales here, we're on an equal footing. You know, Clyde have no councillors, we have no councillors, and much to my surprise, we are in a better financial position than Clyde and Cardiff. And the response, as well, we have to sort of, we live in political bubbles, we think about this stuff a lot, and we argue with ourselves internally and at meetings. The general public, the response to this alliance in Cardiff has been overwhelmingly positive. People have said, thank God, you're not a squad, you're talking together, you're trying to get things done. It's my experience, I can only speak from my experience so far, when we are in the early days of it. But the other thing to remember about this agreement, this didn't happen because Clyde came to us. We didn't go to Clyde. Members of the community, active campaigners within Cardiff, fighting for their communities, recognised that at the events they held, the only parties that ever showed up was us and Clyde. So they approached us individually to say, is there a way we can take this forward? Can we actually speak for the communities of Cardiff? So it's a great step forward. It has also helped when the process of populating the candidate list, and as Ian's referenced, we are going to have a green in every ward. That's the other thing people need to know about this deal. This isn't old-fashioned horse trading. This isn't us saying we're not standing there because you can win, you better not stand here. This is standing together, because every ward in Cardiff is a multi-seat ward. The ambition, and I'm sure we'll achieve, is there will be at least one Clyde and one Green in every ward standing on that joint ticket. That presents something very different to the public. So you haven't taken away the public's choice to vote Green, because the Green Party logo will be on the ballot paper next to our candidate's name.
Do you know what Clyde Cymru's position is on the MIM model?
I've heard Adam Price speak against it. It was Adam Price interrogating Mark Drakeford. It's when I saw Mark Drakeford make an embarrassment of himself. So I haven't looked at their policy, but I think it was, they've definitely had anti-PFI stuff in their manifesto before.
Thanks very much, Anthony.